Good evening, Tulane parents. This is Patty Wyatt, the Director of Parent Programs and External Relations for the Division of Student Affairs at Tulane. And tonight we have our Help Your Student Make a Strong Start webinar for parents at Tulane. And we're happy to be with you tonight to provide some information and to also offer a chance for you to ask a few questions. I'm going to tell you how these proceed in case this is your first webinar. So we will present the information. You'll be able to see this on the screen. You are not mic'd, but at the end you will have a chance to type in your questions. We ask that you wait until we give you the cue to start typing because we've tried to anticipate most of your questions and build that into the presentation. So we'll ask you to just kind of wait until we give you that cue. And then on your side of the on your control panel, you have that little box where you can type in the questions, and you also have the ability to raise your hand. And so we also just like to check to make sure that you're there, you can see things, you can hear things. So would you please raise your hand if you can see the screen? So I see some hands going up, so that's good. That also tells me you can hear me because you wouldn't know that I asked that question if you couldn't hear me. But one thing to know about the volume is that this is the volume that we'll be using. You can control the volume on your end with your controls. So keep that in mind. And periodically we may ask if everything's coming through okay. We've got several presenters tonight, so we want to make sure that we're projecting loud enough for you to hear us. So I'm going to put your little hands down and ask a couple of other questions. So how many of you are joining us for the first webinar? Is this your first time to participate in one of our parent webinars? So raise your hand if you're okay. So we have a few people for the first time, so that's wonderful. So one thing I want all of you to know is that I always send all of the parents who registered, whether you were able to join us live for the webinar or not, I will send you an email the next day with a PDF of all the slides and a link to the recording. And you'll receive that before it even gets posted on the parent program's website. But that's the other thing that we always do is we have an archive of the completed webinars at parents.tulane.edu. You look for the Communication with Parents tab, go to the webinar section, and you'll find them there. And that's also where the schedule of upcoming webinars is, so you can register for additional ones in the future. So please keep that in mind. This time we also sent you a quick survey to just kind of get a sense of what your concerns might be. And of the people who responded, you said that most of you said you don't have specific concerns right now, but you just want to be more prepared to support your student. And then, of course, I accidentally made a mistake and made the following questions all required. So it forced you to choose a concern that might be uppermost in your mind. So I'm not sure how accurate those answers were since you were kind of forced to make a choice. But of those, we did find that it was pretty balanced in what you indicated your interests were. So we've got good information here, but we've got a lot of information. And our goal tonight is to kind of get through this pretty quickly. So we're going to hit the highlights since you can see the screen and read those points and then go back to it later if you want. But we'd like to try to cover the content pretty quickly so that we can get to the Q&A portion a lot faster. So we hope that you will feel that that serves your interests well. I think that from feedback we've received before, parents really appreciate that Q&A at the end. So that's our goal. So the other thing I'd like to ask is for you to indicate your student's class year. We offer this topic particularly for students who are in their first year at Tulane, but a lot of the information is definitely applicable to the start of any academic year. So for how many of you have a student who's a first year student and first time freshman? Okay, looks like most of you. How many of you have a new transfer student who might be either a sophomore or junior transfer? Okay. And then anybody with students who are juniors or seniors, upper division? Okay, that's really helpful. So thanks for letting me know. So I want to share with you who we have tonight. So we have Rosette Elghossain. Just talked to her about pronouncing that correctly, and then I stumbled. And she is one of the psychologists with our Counseling and Psychological Services department. Shawn is one of the staff members who actually lives in the residence halls with your students. He's a full-time staff member who has a master's degree, who has experience leading those students and programming and counseling students who live in the residence halls. And Sarah Montes is an assistant dean in our Academic and Career Advising Center. And so you can tell from the background of those people that we're going to discuss several different elements of the transition experience for students. And so to set the stage, I just want to give you a little bit of context and let you know that we certainly see a typical adjustment pattern for first-year students. And years ago when I was a graduate student, we looked at a cross-cultural adjustment model and looked at how similar that was to first-year students' transition experience. And if you think about it, going from high school and being at home to college and being away, and especially being in New Orleans, can really be a completely different culture in many ways for students. And so I really think that some of these same stages are very typical, and I've seen it enough to almost be able to tell. It's like I can feel the seismic shift when students go from one stage to another. And so at the very beginning, they can very much be in a honeymoon stage where everything seems wonderful and everything's designed to be exciting and new, and there's a lot of activity and attention to new students. And then a few weeks in, they can kind of come up against a culture shock. And that can be really where people are about now, honestly. And so that's exactly why we wanted to present this webinar about now. But what we find is if they make it through those challenges initially, then they'll get adjusted. That can happen more quickly for extroverts than introverts. So it's important to kind of pay attention to those differences in personality types and know that there can be some sort of another phase of feeling isolated or having some adjustment difficulties. But our goal is that we kind of meet them where they are, and that we help students understand that these challenges are typical and they're healthy and they're normal, and that they'll kind of come through that with some acceptance and integrate this new experience into their lives and meet those challenges. So we also hope that you will understand that this is typical and normal, and reassure your students that it's okay to experience some of these challenges, and to know that that's what we are trained to do, that we expect, and that we want to help students deal with those things. So the other thing to understand is that given this stage in their lives, just as sort of typical 18 to 22-year-old college students in this young adult phase of their life, they've got particular tasks that they're working on in terms of becoming adults and establishing their own identities. And this can be really salient in this transition time, that they are working on some of these things outlined in really worthwhile studies that have been done over time to kind of show us that this is what students are working on. And so developing competence, managing emotions, moving from autonomy to interdependence, and developing mature interpersonal relationships are very typical for students to be working on and sometimes struggling with, and also sometimes making great strides and growth. And that's what we hope that you will also see over time, is growth in those areas. And you'll see that while students are growing and stretching intellectually, they're also doing the same personally and socially and just in many, many ways in their lives. So what we want to ask parents to do to help is, first of all, to try to coach your student through these changes and challenges, but don't rush in to fix things. You are far away and we are right here, and we're all organized to help your students. So please encourage them to reach out to us to assist them with those things. And I think one of the best things you can do, if anything, is kind of coach them and give them advice about how to present their needs and their requests. That's where you can be especially helpful and kind of giving them some advice about if you're going to email someone, present it like this, or, you could ask them, well, how do you think you should explain this situation that's going on? And if you kind of let them bounce some ideas off of you, and if you work more as a sounding board than a director, you will be helping them grow through that experience. If you yourself are finding these conversations difficult, we've got some more help for you. And so there are webinars in the archive that are especially about talking with your student about those challenges, especially at a distance, and one about parents' critical role in raising resilient students. So check those out on the webinar archive if you want some additional specific guidance. So here's how we're going to set things up this evening. We're going to look at what the adjustment concerns are, and then we're going to talk about the steps, habits, and resources to learn to get through those things and manage those. We definitely see growth as this combination of challenge and support. Too much challenge and people kind of retreat and they don't grow. Too much support and they really don't learn to manage their own challenges and tasks and grow. So we're all about kind of helping them meet those challenges and learn how to work through them. So we'll look at academic things, social and community concerns, a few practical concerns, and personal ones too. So the thing to kind of see about this is that for every one of those concerns, there's a corresponding way for students to approach that, and there are tons of resources to help them. So we're going to start with Sarah, and she's going to talk about the academic adjustment and the resources for helping students with that.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sarah Montes, and as Penny mentioned, I am an assistant dean in the Academic Advising Center. And I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about it, the academic adjustment for your students. Most of your students, many of your students came to orientation in the summer and registered with this friendly group of folks in the Richardson building on campus. We work hard to tailor our advising services and meet the students' needs and get to know them so that we are helping them select courses that make sense for their academic plans and also keep in mind their strengths and abilities. That being said, at the beginning of the semester, many freshmen have already visited our advising center to make some tweaks and adjustments to their schedule. And I'll be talking a little bit later about the academic calendar so you can have an outline of why the students may have been able to make some changes to their schedule and how that works going forward. In terms of academic adjustment, one important piece of adjusting to college is obviously adjusting to college courses. And we in the Advising Center are here to help the students who may be having some difficulty in classes or are just struggling to kind of manage their course load in one way or another. We have techniques and strategies around time management and study skills, and also know a lot about all the different academic programs that the students are in. So we are a great resource for your students. I want to tell you a little bit about how academic advising is structured at Tulane. So all undergraduate full-time students are assigned to an undergraduate academic advisor in the Newcomb Tulane College. Students can easily see their academic advisor by clicking on the Advising Make Appointment link on our homepage on the Advising Center website. It's also in every advisor's email signature. We do a lot of proactive outreach with our students, and so all your students should have an email from their assigned advisor in their inbox if they haven't already seen that. And those students can also always consult with their advisor over email and ask quick questions. We also have a walk-in advisor available most days from 8:30 to 5 p.m. And at some points in the semester, those hours are reduced slightly to 10 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But those students who may not need an appointment and just have a quick question are welcome to stop by the advisor of the day desk as well in our front office in the Richardson building. We see advising as a resource and a partnership. And so it's important for students to respond to emails from their advisor and to schedule appointments on a regular basis with their advisor. We aim to see our freshman students about 4 times a year to discuss core curriculum requirements, course selection, transition to college issues, overall academic planning, including major and minor selection, time management, academic success strategies, and we also incorporate career-related advising areas into our appointments. In the Advising Center, we also work very deliberately and carefully with our students who are undeclared and undecided on their major. We call our students, the students in this category, exploratory students, and they have an advisor who's specially trained in working with undecided students to help them understand the process that it takes to go from exploratory to declared in a major. And along with that, there's a fabulous resource in the career development class called the CRDB 1090 Majors, Internships, and Jobs course. This is a 1-credit course that students can take at any time in their academic career at Tulane. But at the freshman level, it's designed to assist especially those exploratory students in having time in their schedule once a week during this 1-hour, 1-credit course to actually explore interests and really dive deep into self-exploration relating to strengths, interests, and values to help them get closer to the process of actually deciding on an academic plan and major. Outside of the Academic Advising Center, we also have a fabulous resource in the Student Success Center and the Academic Learning Center. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about that, those two areas of the college. So the Student Success Center, their staff and programs can help students learn to adjust their study habits to the demands of their college classes. So there's a link there so you can read a little bit more about their programs. There's also a great video on their website that outlines all their resources. The Success Center has 2 programs in particular where professional staff people can support students in their readiness to adjust to college and also potentially being more resilient with the potential setback, such as a low test grade or something this semester. So the Academic Recharge Program will be opening very soon in later September and early October. That program is for students who are seeking academic coaching around time management, study skills, and other issues that might relate to their adjustment to college. The Academic Recharge Program is a free service that the Success Center offers, as are all the services that I'm going to mention. That is essentially success coaching light in a way. That program pairs a student who applies for the program with a success coach, and they have potentially 2 to 4 meetings with the success coach in the second half of the semester, sometime between late September and in November. And they'll go over sort of acute, critical, short-term needs that might need to be addressed relating to an academic or sort of adjustment issue of some sort. So students can apply for Academic Recharge online. And if your student is dealing with kind of struggling with kind of just overall adjustment issues to college and time management in particular, and other issues that might be related to sort of executive functioning, we recommend that the students might check out the Academic Recharge Program. Success Coaching is also a fabulous program at Tulane. The Success Coaching program is similar to Academic Recharge, except that it does extend to the full year. Students can go ahead and put in a coaching application now, but it is at capacity for the fall 2017 semester. Our success coaches partner with students to help them envision for themselves short-term and longer-term goals that relate to their sort of time at Tulane, as it relates not just to academics, but sometimes it might relate to career ideation or career planning, personal issues or personal goals, such as maybe financial stability or roommate or personal, sort of interpersonal issues. And then overall, just sort of holding them accountable from a coaching perspective in the process of becoming sort of ready to kind of launch really fully into your own sort of personhood as a college student. So that's success coaching in a nutshell. The Academic Learning Center is formally called the Tutoring Center here at Tulane. The Academic Learning Center supports students in a variety of ways. It's mostly peer-led services, and our peer tutors are available to work with students on one-on-one basis, but also in some group settings in different forms. So the tutoring appointments are sort of the traditional tutoring appointments. Students can sign up for those online, and they're in various subject areas. So this link here that you're seeing is great. It has the students can log into that appointment system, plug in the name of the course that they're taking that they need a tutor in, and find available appointments through the online system. The Writing Center operates in a similar way. Students who sign up for writing appointments typically have the peer tutor will actually email their writing instructor or the instructor of the course that is connected to the content that they're working on after the session, and give the instructor sort of a summary of what's going on in the writing session. So that's a very valuable resource. And Supplemental Instruction, or SI, at Tulane is an award-winning support service for our students. The Supplemental Instructor is a peer, a student who has had great success in a course, who then takes the course again, but not for credit, alongside the students who are taking it for the first time, and then hosts evening supplemental instruction sessions at least once a week throughout the semester for any student in the course to help them kind of get through the content and reinforce important concepts. And we find generally that students who engage fully in the Academic Learning Center's services are helpful. These services are helpful to all students, and not just the students who are struggling academically. They have really good data to support that, and our students who do engage in these services do generally have a stronger GPA at the end of the semester than those that may not take full advantage of this service. So can't speak highly enough about the Academic Learning Center. I promised you I would get to the academic adjustment and the academic calendar, that is. And I just wanted to mention that quickly. Tulane has what I see as a very helpful academic calendar as it relates to first-year students, because it gives students lots of time to make really careful and informed decisions about both the classes that they're going to stick with at the very beginning of the semester, but also gives them a generous drop period if their first semester isn't going quite as well as they might have otherwise hoped or thought. So we just came up on our first deadline on the academic calendar, the last day to add, which was last Friday, September 8th. And the last day to drop a class without any record on the transcript is September 29th. Now, students can go ahead and make changes to their schedule by dropping a course on the class schedule system on their own. They don't need instructor approval or advisor approval to do that. But we do strongly recommend that the student consult with their advisor before dropping a class. And as I mentioned before, they can see their advisor via the appointment system on our website. We expect midterm grades in the Gibson portal for around October 18th. At that time, there will be targeted outreach to the students to let them know about midterm grades and the impending last day to drop a class deadline on October 30th. We also do specific and individual outreach to students who have any grade lower than a C, or C, so it's C- or lower, get individual outreach from their academic advisor, asking them to come in for an appointment for a conversation to discuss any concerns that might be going on with that course, and to help them plug into resources and to give them the full picture of all their options at that point. And priority registration for the following semester is beginning this semester on November 6th. And at that point, we'll see a real uptick in our advising appointments, and students should be proactive to meet with their advisor and well in advance of their registration date, which is based on registration earned hours every semester. So students can register that way. Just in closing on my section, the academic adjustment tips that I just want to make sure are your good takeaways for your students is to help them remember to go to class regularly. It seems rather obvious, but sometimes that's not always the case. And also take some time to understand the syllabus and the course calendar for each course that they're in, and translate those important deadlines and assignments from the syllabus into their own calendar system. We also encourage students to get to know their professors and their Newcomb Tulane College advisor early in the semester, and engage in academic and career planning early and often. Meet with their academic advisor, like I said, on average 4 times a year to make sure that they're fully engaged in that sort of relationship and they're getting the most out of their experience with their advisor. And to use campus resources liberally and ask for help. There are so many people on this campus that want to help these students succeed and help your students really have a fabulous start to their academic career at Tulane. And so that is really sort of the big takeaway here for me. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to pass it along to Shawn and to talk about social adjustment.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shawn Gaines, and I'm the resident director for Monroe. And as Penny mentioned, I do live on campus. So I want to talk to you all a little bit about social adjustment. And one of the first things we have listed is the resident advisor. They live right down the hall and they're here to help. The resident advisor is an upper class student, generally a sophomore, junior, or senior. And their sole purpose is to build community, to connect your students to resources, and to really just serve as an advocate and a transition partner for them. So what you want to remember is anytime your student is struggling or you're really having a conversation with them, you can always use the RA or the resident advisor as someone of a resource or someone who is close by. All resident advisors live in the building and on the hall, and they've also experienced what your students are experiencing, having gone through a first year of college as well. So another thing that I want to mention is that the resident advisors do not operate alone. They have resident directors such as myself, and the resident director is a full-time master's degree holding professional, and they regularly consult and meet with me for extra resources and to help your students navigate. And so remember that RAs do not operate by themselves. They work with RDs who also live in the building to reinforce all of the things that are happening. And so as Penny talked about that transition piece, there's an RD backing up your students and the RAs to make sure that they are getting the most support that they need. So oftentimes I do one-on-one coaching with RAs on how to relate to residents who are struggling. And so it really is a lot of us. And so if you look at central office staff, I'm not going to list all of these, but there is a operations side as well. And all of us work together to make sure that your students are having a quality experience on campus. So one of the most difficult and challenging things that I experience in my work is that students often for the first time are having to share and to live in a space confined in a residence hall. So the roommate agreement is a tool that we use. It's a living, breathing document that each pair of roommates will have to go through over the course of the next 3 weeks with their RA. And so they discuss things in this like security expectations, sharing items, expectations around alcohol usage, cleanliness, what do they want to do with guests coming over, how they're going to communicate that. One of the things I want to drive home is that the first step to resolve any issue is to communicate, collaborate, and negotiate. And the RA is there to help, and it is an expectation that the RA at least review those roommate agreements prior to them being submitted. And as you all know, your students are among the biggest and the brightest that we've had at Tulane. That being said, it's more likely that there's going to be an option for a room swap as opposed to a moving around campus and shuffling. We're really full and we're really tight. And so what I mean by a direct swap is that if your student knows someone perhaps who lives down the hall who is also interested in swapping rooms, that direct swap is a lot easier to facilitate and more likely to happen. Otherwise, we want to refer to that roommate agreement, because when there is an issue or a disagreement that we need to discuss, we're going to actually pull that roommate agreement out and kind of revisit and renegotiate what they both came up with. And I'm often involved in those conversations depending on the severity or the intensity. I would also encourage that your residents, one quick tactic, even if your student lives in a building, in a residence hall, they can open their door, they can spend time in the lounges and the common spaces, and they can talk to their RA. The RA is the friendly person on the floor. They are designated to be there as a helper. And I oftentimes describe the RAs as having the superpower of being the person to unite other people. So just remember that the RA is a great resource for them. So with regard to getting involved, one very easy, low-risk way to get involved is to join the Residence Hall Association. Many of your students have received a variety of forms of communication about this through GroupMe, word of mouth, email, and interest sessions about the Residential Hall Association. So the Residential Hall Association is like a student government within the residence hall, and they work with myself as their advisor or the RD in the building as the advisor. And their sole responsibility or their sole purpose is to create awesome, fantastic, exciting programs and enhancements to the building. They get a budget, they manage a budget, they get the great resume experience of being a part of an organization, they get leadership experience, and they really just enhance the building. And the low-hanging fruit is they get to meet people as well. And so it's about 5 elected officials, and those registration and that nomination closes tonight at 11:59, and all of them have gotten a final push about that as well. And so our numbers are looking pretty good, and we'll have elections here shortly. And if you don't get a chance to tell your student about signing up for RHA, or community government is what it's called more locally in the building, there's always an opportunity to be a floor representative, which means that you represent your floor or your portion of the community to the community government within your building. And so that can happen outside of tonight as well if they don't get a chance to register. And RHA also is well respected and works with many of our campus partners, as you all can see. So just with regard to involvement, involvement is the amount of physical and psychological energy that a student devotes to an activity or an experience. When we talk about involvement, it refers to behavior more exclusively. It doesn't necessarily deal with how they think and feel. It includes time and attention. And involvement is a way to get engaged. So here we have listed on the slide, as you all can see, most students know why it's important to get involved. Not only have you likely mentioned to them why they should get involved from your previous experiences, many of the resident directors talk to students about getting involved, RAs drive that home, but more importantly, it's the how that they get stuck on. So what I would encourage you to do if you're having conversations with your students about maybe perhaps them not knowing what to do or how to get involved, set a goal with them each week. Set a goal about what they could attend, what they're interested in, and there are tons of resources I'm going to share with you in just a second about what they might be interested in attending. So for example, there are Tulane After Dark events, which are alcohol-free late night weekend activities that occur every week in the LBC, and that's an opportunity for them to be engaged and involved. And they can find that information on OrgSync as well, which is listed here, and that's through Gibson. So if you look at the pictures that are coming up, the information is everywhere. I would always offer the RA as that person that's right down the hall. But if you look at this is a variety of ways that your student is getting information about what's happening on campus. And even within the residence hall, if you look at the residence hall bulletin board to the left, RAs are required to create bulletin boards, and on those boards, they generally will advertise content for programs or things that are happening around campus as well. And so likely if a student walks out of a room or your student walks out of their room, if they pass to exit, they're going to see something that's happening on campus. And also word of mouth is powerful as well. And so they'll likely hear from RAs, their OC, peer mentors, other ambassadors about things that are happening on campus.
Okay. So this is Penny again, and I just want to mention some of these sort of practical adjustment things. It's sort of the daily living, things are different here. It's different than it was at home. And not many of you mentioned, of those of you who answered the survey, that these were things that you were concerned about. But I will just let you in on a little tip, is that sometimes at this point in the semester, students might be having anxiety about how they're doing in classes, or making that transition to college level academic work, or maybe they are feeling homesick, or there's some other things going on, but what they might complain about are just those everyday things that come up. So I would want you to know that that's a phenomenon, but then also to know that for all of these different really practical concerns, everything from how do I get around town or off campus, to food and repairs that might be needed in their room, to how to stay safe, or how to manage a budget. Well, there are resources and procedures that can help them with those things. So I'm not going to list every single one of these, but I encourage you, when you get the slides, to go back and look at these things that are linked here, and know that we have ways to deal with these things, and they don't require calling mom or dad. I know that they will do that, or they'll complain to mom or dad often about these different little aspects of their life, and that'll be stressful for you. But what we want to train the students to do is to learn to use these resources and navigate these procedures on their own, because it'll be a lot more efficient and effective if they can learn to do that, and it'll be more direct and it'll happen more quickly. So take a look at these again when you have a chance. So we're going to talk next about personal adjustment, and Rosette's going to talk with you about these things and the great resources we provide in that area.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Rosette Elghossain. I'm a clinical psychologist at our counseling center here at Tulane. And like everyone was mentioning right before me, this is a challenging time for the vast majority of students. And I'm sure we all know that on, a cognitive or at least intellectual level before, our students come to Tulane or begin at any new stage of life. But once it actually begins, it can be confusing, can be overwhelming for you and your students. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about signs that may indicate your student is struggling with something beyond that typical normative adjustment, and then some of the resources that we offer students to provide them with support as they navigate those challenges. So if you think about what happens when a student begins, university life or moves to a new place, and just in general this phase, thinking 18, maybe 17 to 22, a lot of individuation is happening. And what that means is they're sort of growing and maybe developing away from the family of origin, really experimenting with what their values are going to look like, identity development, and dealing with these bigger sort of existential questions. So that can be incredibly challenging to navigate, especially when you're far away from everything that's been familiar and every source of support you've had leading up to that point. So these are some just sort of signs of stress that might indicate your student is dealing with some kind of transition. And kind of like Penny was saying toward the beginning of this presentation, a lot of this is normative and to be expected, and we see it in most students that come to college. I would say the biggest rule of thumb is your student. And so if any of these are atypical for them, or if there's something that's going on that it's concerning for you, keep that line of communication open with them and help them get connected with the resources that are here. Some other things to look out for: anything that presents itself, as an extreme. So I can say, just anecdotally, having worked here for several years, a lot of students come in with some degree of perfectionism, and that's not always like the textbook version that we see. It can be deep self-criticism, high expectations that nobody else is setting on themselves. It can present itself as black and white thinking in areas not just with academics. It can be food, it can be relationships. And there's a lot of pressure to present as really high functioning, or just pretend that everything's okay. And as you know, especially with technology, which is a thing that we could do a webinar for separately, things can be very image-based nowadays. And everyone wants to look good and just present this aura that everything's fine. And so there's a lot of hiding of that vulnerability that all students are going through. So what we like to foster here is what we call a community of care. and encouraging students to not be stoic and not isolate, but rather reach out and talk about those feelings that they're having and get validation from each other. And that's something that you can help them do as well, is kind of normalize these things that are that they're experiencing. So here are some things that might help with that adjustment and what we call just self-care, a good night's sleep, regular exercise, provided there are any medical conditions that would prohibit that. And like I said before, the thing that I would stress the most is connectedness and finding genuine relationships, whether that's through family, RAs, a mentor here on campus, peers, and just trying to take things lightly and as they come. So here, I work at the counseling center. We also have a health center and a department for wellness and health promotion, and we all fall under just Tulane Campus Health. I'm only going to be discussing CAP services, but in the Q&A section, if y'all have any questions about the other components, I'd be happy to try my best and answer them. So coming to CAPS, if your student feels like what they're going through is beyond the realm of that normative adjustment or you're concerned about them, they can call us, they can come in to make an appointment. We're in a very convenient location here on the Uptown campus. And they can call this number on the screen and say they'd like an initial consultation. If they know that they're looking for medication, so say they've been on something for quite some time, or they know they're interested in one of our groups, they can go ahead and state that on the phone, and we'll set them up directly with the person responsible for that, that portion of things. So during a consultation, and this might be helpful to just sort of introduce your student to the idea, it's really not overwhelming, or we like to think that it's not. It's about 20 minutes, and they'll meet with one of our therapists. We have a multidisciplinary team, and that therapist or that clinician will discuss with them what is concerning them, what brings them into CAPS, and then check in about these key areas that you see on the screen. And then from there, we'll work with them to think about what next steps would be the most appropriate. So some of the possible recommendations that we would make, and of course this is based on our clinical judgment and sort of agreeing with the student what might be the best fit for them. We have a lot of groups that I'll discuss in a second. We do brief individual therapy here at CAPS, so students are eligible to receive up to 12 sessions per academic year. We do have psychiatrists and a medical psychologist on staff for med management. And then depending on the case, so for example, if your student has been in therapy for a while, or you know that they might need ongoing services, something more than 12 sessions, we have a care coordinator who can help them pursue services off campus so they don't have to worry about that limit and can get connected early on with someone that they can have a relationship with. And then of course, as needed, we consult with our partners on campus to make sure your student is as well supported as possible. So these are the current group offerings. I'd like to point out the Freshman Transition Group. That's the first one in the left column. It's one of our most popular groups every year, and that just goes to show that this is, you know, being a first-year student, being a new student somewhere is challenging, and that validation and that shared experience piece is incredibly important. I'd also like to point out the Life at Tulane groups in the right column. We've got 3 per week, and that's so we can be as flexible as possible for student schedules. And this is a group where they can come in with really any kind of concern, anxiety, depression, adjustment, social stuff, relationship issues, and we'll support them through that. And then, of course, we've got more specific groups tailored to various needs. If your student is curious about one of them, we can talk to them about it during consultation, or they can just go ahead and call and ask to meet with that group facilitator straight ahead. And as I mentioned before, if we believe or if you already know that your student needs ongoing care in the community, we have a clinician here who helps our students find those services in New Orleans. And she has developed this sort of working document of referrals that we believe would be a good fit for our students, people that we would recommend. And she works with them based on insurance, and you know, if they have any preferences as to an approach or location, she'll help them figure that out so they don't have to navigate the jungle of providers on their own. And again, these are just signs for concern to look out for. And like I said, the rule of thumb is if there's anything concerning, anything that's atypical for your student, or any of these changes that you're worried about or they're worried about, We would love to have them in our clinic so we can help them the best that we can. If you're worried about your student and they are hesitant to come in, or if you feel like it's an extremely urgent situation, because we're a strictly confidential facility, we cannot reach out to your student unless we have a relationship with them already. What you can do is contact case management. That phone number is up on the screen, or you can file an anonymous concerns report or include your name, up to you, online, and that goes real time to the case management staff, and they will reach out to your student, do a room check or a safety check or whatever it is that needs to happen. We do understand that sometimes emergencies happen, mental health emergencies, and in those cases we offer same-day emergency consultations between noon and 5. And because we close at 5, if at all possible, we ask that students come in around 4 p.m. And this is for things like suicidal or homicidal ideation, or if your student has experienced an assault or a recent loss, or has to make a major decision within the next few days. We would recommend that they come in to talk to us. And then for 24/7 support, we have this free confidential support line for students called The Line. The number's up there, and they can call that for any reason at all, and we're not even notified who's calling and what for. Again, some more resources for, during the business day, and then all hours. We have a police department here on campus, and also a non-emergency phone number that they can contact. And this would be a great idea to have them program it into their phone, because none of us are going to remember phone numbers.
Okay, so parents, it's time to type in your questions, and we will try to get through as many of these as possible. We've got several minutes here that we can do that, so go ahead and start submitting those, and we'll get organized here to look at your questions. Or it might be that we've already answered those. So let us know if you have anything you'd like to, anything more specific you want to ask about, or clarification on anything. So the first question is the CRDV course similar to the TIDES course? So I'll let Sarah answer this.
So it's only similar in that it's a 1-credit course. That course is not required for students at all, so only students who want to take that course are taking it, whereas TIDES, all first semester, first year students must take a TIDES or an honors colloquium. And so the CRDV is essentially that optional course. I think one thing I did not mention about the CRDV course when I was talking earlier is that that course is for students outside of the School of Business. Students in the School of Business have a different course that they will take on career development called CDMA. And so they should be taking that course in the sophomore year, whereas everybody else can take CRDV at any time.
Okay, thank you. And I've seen that whole syllabus for CRDV, and I highly recommend it, whether your student takes it spring semester of their first year or fall semester of their junior year, and it's tailored accordingly. So something to keep in mind, even if not for right now. So the next question, and I know that Shawn can answer this, but I'm going to jump in. A question was, how can we identify and connect with our students' RA? And we will say that we prefer that parents not contact the RAs. They're student staff members. They are in class. They're doing a lot of different things. If you feel like you need to connect with a housing and residence life staff member, it's really most appropriate that you reach out to the resident director. Would you agree, Shawn?
Yeah, you can call the central office.
And so the central office is 504-865-5724. You can see that on the screen. And just let that person know which building your student is in, and they'll transfer you to the resident director for that area. So it's really kind of best that a parent connects to the full-time staff member rather than to the student staff member. We always want to encourage you to encourage your student to talk with their RA about things, but that is the most appropriate person for a parent to contact would be the full-time RD. So the next question is, if the success I think that your question is about the coaching program. If Success Coaching is already full at this point, when do you recommend that interested students sign up for future semesters?
Yeah, I would recommend signing up now, and signing up for that wait list, because those would be the students that will be first contacted when spaces open.
So the next question is, I'm concerned about safety when the kids venture into New Orleans. Can't imagine that the university can manage that. So, of course, your students are on their own, and we're not following them around everywhere that they go. But we do have a lot of education that we do with students about being safe, developing safe habits and personal safety practices. And I also think that we offer several things that can assist with that. And so I strongly encourage you to just please reinforce these things with your students. And so those, there are links to particulars about those on that practical concerns chart that I gave you. So I'll mention a few right away. First of all, our TUBD staff are available to be personal escorts, and all the students have to do is call the number that is listed in that chart, and the dispatcher will send an officer to meet them on campus and walk them back to their residence hall if that's the case. We find that this is a very underutilized service. So our TUPD officers do a lot to just promote community policing, developing relationship with students, kind of breaking down some walls and showing how friendly they are. They have things like coffee with the cops and pizza with the police, and things like that to just kind of get out there and be friendly and try to encourage students to look at them as helpers instead of someone who's trying to catch them doing something wrong. Also, there is a virtual escort mobile app that students can download, and that's called Rave Guardian. So they can put in their destination, and it kind of follows them and tracks them, and then they can sort of turn it off when they reach their destination. And if based on GPS and sort of estimated time that it would take to get there isn't sort of all synced at the right time, then a message goes to the dispatcher and they will call the student. If they don't get a response back, they send an officer to that location to look for that student so they can track them. So it is called Rave Guardian, and the link to it is on that chart that I gave for practical concerns. So that's really a lot better than calling mom and having mom listen along as you walk from the library, which I've heard a lot of students do or parents talk about. So please just stress for your students too that there's no reason for someone to walk alone on campus late at night. Now, off campus, we are always encouraging students to travel in groups, to only be with people they already know, and to use our services that we do provide for getting around off campus or from getting back from an off-campus student's home back to campus. We have a system that's pretty much like Uber or Lyft, that you can download an app and go point to point and request a ride. And it operates within a mile or a little bit more than a mile of campus, and that's listed. The app itself is called Tap Ride. The zone within that perimeter is called the Gold Zone. So if you look at that chart, you'll also see some things there. I do think that with the proliferation of Uber and Lyft and the fact that those have been a little bit less expensive than cabs, I do feel like I hear students using that, and I think that's smart, especially if they're going together in groups, then the cost of that is less. And so I think that if they're using those kind of services rather than walking around in places where they don't know, or I think sometimes they just kind of they think they're invincible, and they're not always being careful enough to forego walking when it's really late. And I think that you just make yourself vulnerable if you are kind of out late when there's not a lot of traffic, not a lot of foot traffic. And so that's just something they need to avoid. And it's just something we all need to just keep reiterating and reinforcing to them to kind of not go alone. And I think that it's not necessarily that it's always problematic. It's just that why make yourself an easy, vulnerable target if you don't have to? And so that's really the way I kind of look at it. So please, please, please encourage your students to use those resources.
Yeah, also we, also in addition to TUPD, we have a private security company that's on campus as well. We've increased the number of those, I don't know what they're called, but those emergency towers where you press the blue button. Yes.
Yeah, the blue light.
And just
poles.
General lighting on and around campus. And then I would encourage your students to get plugged into the campus health social media pages, because the Wellness and Health Promotion Department does a lot of targeted psychoeducation around festival season and things like that in terms of alcohol safety, which is important to talk about because students do drink. So it's important to educate them on their safety, and just in terms of traveling and ways to keep themselves safe. And so they do student-friendly, sort of youth-targeted marketing around that.
Yes, because the over drinking makes them even more vulnerable if they are in those situations. So we're always trying to teach them to be smart about the way they do that and reduce harm, and reduce vulnerability. And so in addition to festivals, things like we do a lot of education before the Mardi Gras season, and we couch it all in the excitement of learning about Carnival in New Orleans. As a way to kind of, it's like the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down. We teach them about parades and all the history and pomp and circumstance of all that, while we are also giving them really good practical safety advice. So rest assured, we are always trying to educate your students about those kinds of things. So the next question is, any advice about how to encourage my son to utilize his academic advisor when he feels like he doesn't need, quote unquote, need advising? Do advisors ever reach out to the students? Are they required to have the 4 advising session, or is that just a suggestion? So take it away, Sarah.
Well, I would start with the question of over maybe in a couple weeks, have you heard from your academic advisor? Because we will be reaching out to any freshmen. We track the students essentially in a system that we use to kind of monitor our students' progress and engagement with advising services. So we know which students are not engaging with advisors, and we reach out to them proactively. And so if your student hasn't connected with the advisor, then we recommend that you might say, hey, have you heard from your advisor by the end of this month? And that being said, advising is not a mandatory service at Tulane unless the student has a risk factor that the advising center has identified, such as a low midterm or final grade in a course, or an academic alert that might relate to absences or something like that that a faculty member has filed. So unless the student kind of earns the distinction of needing to be advised, they have to make the first step to engage with their academic advisor. But we do, like I said, a lot of proactive outreach throughout the year at various points in the semester, and even more targeted outreach for any student that hasn't already engaged with advising.
One of the things that I tell parents to encourage in students is to understand that they do need to take on the responsibility for cultivating relationships, that they're not always going to be the same kind of relationships that they had as a high school student or younger, whether it's social relationships with peers or these helpful relationships with staff members who were put in place to be there for help. And so they need to take initiative to make themselves known, to reach out to those folks, to make that appointment. It's good to make an appointment when you don't need advising, so that you've got sort of free range to talk about anything with your advisor, and you never know what might come up in terms of great suggestions for courses to take, or the advisor getting to know that student a little bit better so they have even more targeted advice to give them in the future. And so I think that it's just reminding them that they need to make that effort, and that it's going to be a good investment that will pay off, whether it's using professors' office hours to drop in and talk to them about assignments or questions, or even if they don't need help, but just show some interest and have some opportunity for one-on-one time with someone like a professor. And I also think that extends to their social relationships with peers. They're in a situation now where they're around a lot of new people. Whereas for a lot of our students, they went to school with the same people from either K through 12 or maybe all of middle school and high school, and you don't replace those relationships overnight. And now they're also in a different pattern of relating to their peers. They're not in class every single day with them. They're not sharing a locker or kind of hanging out, in the hallways, but they do have this other ready opportunity to have neighbors that they live with all the time. But it takes some different kind of attention and cultivation. And I think it's also important that you help them, you disabuse them of the idea that many will have that everybody else has friends but me. Because I do think that I would highly, I would certainly echo what Rosette said, that with social media and Facebook and all the posturing that can kind of go on when people are, when they're uncomfortable and they're new, they're not going to let on that they also feel homesick or lonely. And yet that's so much more common than they realize. And so taking that step to kind of reach out and make connections to other people and to always be introducing themselves and just understand that everybody feels awkward. So one of the things we used to say in orientation is we want to normalize awkward. And that if you just remember that everyone feels awkward, then nobody has to feel awkward. So so please remind your students of that in, as gentle, a wonderfully helpful parent way that you can. So another question from a parent is, do you also reach out to transfer students as well as first-year students from academic advising? And so, yes, transfer students do get that kind of outreach.
Yes, so yeah, transfer students have a dedicated advisor named Shelby Siegel, and she's fabulous. She follows the same outreach calendar that the other advisors do, and in fact has a lot of contact with our transfer students leading up to and at the beginning of the start of the semester.
And if I can just put a special plea into the parents of transfer students, and those of you who participated in the parent orientation presentation that I did for transfer parents, I know this from having been the director of orientation for several years and working with transfer students, that sometimes it's really hard to get through to those transfers to ask them to participate and to take advantage of these things that are offered. I think that sometimes they feel sort of like that I've been there, done that, don't want to be treated like a first-year student anymore. But they still need to get to know resources and procedures at Tulane. And we know that they may have been in school somewhere else, but that wasn't the best fit for them, or they wouldn't have wanted to transfer. So we want to make sure that this experience goes better than that. And we also know that their time frame then for getting involved, for making decisions, for taking all those great courses is shortened. So we don't want them to waste time, kind of wandering. So please, please, please remind your transfer students that we really do want to assist them, but we need them to take some ownership for making use of the good resources. So we're about the end of our time, so I think I'll make a last call for questions and have you type that in really quickly here if you still have a question. I also want to just remind you that we always appreciate your feedback about the webinars, and so if you have any quick comments you want to make, to type those in now, you may do that. We appreciate both constructive criticism and then knowing what parts of the webinar or elements that you appreciated or felt particularly helpful. It helps us refine our offerings every year. It also helps me know whether the same topics are good ones to continue offering. And then if you think about it later and want to offer some other comments, you're always welcome to do that by reaching me at parents@tulane.edu. It's parents@tulane.edu. We appreciate comments about this webinar or suggestions for other topics that might interest you. And we really do want to provide information, sort of that just-in-time framework, so that you get information and resources and information to share with your student at a time that, before you need it. So there's one comment that came in, please spell out the terms and fewer acronyms. And I apologize for that. We can very much fall into our Tulane lingo. So let me backtrack and try to think of a few things. So CAPS is something that we said several times. So that stands for Counseling and Psychological Services. So that's the traditional counseling center type resource that you find at many different schools. And so it does go by the acronym CAPS. TUPD is our Tulane University Police Department. The RAs are the resident advisors. That's the student peer level staff member. The resident directors are that full-time person. So Shawn is one of those resident directors who is a full-time staff member. I think that CRDV, that's another one. So that course is kind of a way to make a career development abbreviation. So CRDV. And TIDES is the Tulane Interdisciplinary Experiences Seminar. That's the 1 credit hour class that all first year students have to take. There's 60 to 80 different sections of that and lots of different topics, but they all have to take a TIDES class or a colloquium in the honors program, right? So I hope that unscrambled some of those acronyms. I apologize for that. That was very helpful feedback. Thank you so much. So if there are no further comments or questions, we will close now and just watch your email probably tomorrow afternoon for a PDF of the slides and a link to the recording in case you would like to review everything. One last comment that came in was that the laminated card that we gave to parents at orientation sessions this past summer was really helpful. So some of those numbers are embedded within the webinar slides here, but yes, I'll include just a snapshot of that so that you can make your own little handy dandy card to keep those numbers helpful and keep them handy. I think that we will close now. So we hope everyone has a good evening and that this has helped you feel like you can be more informed to support your student through their challenges and opportunities for growth and development at Tulane. So thank you very much, everyone.